Finally tonight, a tribute to a young man and his family who've been leading the fight for disability reform in Australia. This program was planning to film next week with the New South Wales Minister for Disability Services, Andrew Constance, as he spent the day caring for Shane O'Reilly, a profoundly disabled 21-year-old with cerebral palsy. The occasion was to highlight the state government's plan to introduce individual funding packages for people with a disability. Viewers might remember Shane and his mother, Sue O'Reilly, discussing their campaign for a national disability insurance scheme with Quentin Dempster last year. Well, sadly on Monday, Shane O'Reilly died. Like many profoundly disabled people, Shane's early death was not totally unexpected. But that doesn't make it any less heartbreaking for his family and for the thousands of people who stood alongside him in the fight for disability reform.
Shane O'Reilly was the third child of journalists David and Sue O'Reilly. He was born 10 weeks premature and while in intensive care was infected with a hospital-borne bug. He sustained severe brain damage and was left with spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy.
We are all mostly not called upon to be the best that we can be, but that wasn't the case for Sue and David O'Reilly. They were called upon to be maybe bigger than they'd ever thought they could be. It was the way the whole family more than rose to the occasion of caring and loving this little boy and dedicated themselves entirely to it, brother and sister, as well as mum and dad.
We regarded it as going into disability exile. We certainly wouldn't have left our families and our friends and our jobs and our home and moved to the other side of the world if there'd been something sort of comparable in Australia.
What was horrendous was that Shane was so severely disabled there was nowhere in Australia where he could have proper residential care, and that's a great disgrace for a wealthy country like ours.
The O'Reillys moved to the UK, and former Bulletin journalist David O'Reilly spent much of his time caring for his son.
He worked with him every day, keeping his muscles moving so that the boy's body didn't shrink into a little ball. So he exercised with him every day. They slept with him at night because he couldn't turn himself over, so they had to do it. So really, between them as parents, they didn't sleep for years and years. And they did all of that to give this child a quality of life that they felt he deserved. And I have to keep saying, Geordie and Laura, his brother and sister, were equally committed in a way that, you know, children grow up fast when, in a way, they lost part of their childhood to give Shane a life.
But in 2006, David O'Reilly died of cancer and the family returned to Australia.
When David died, despite the fact that wherever they go they made friends, there wasn't the same support network, and Shane's needs were very serious, so they came home. Sue came home with the two children and with Shane. And then, extraordinarily, with all that Sue was dealing with and all that Geordie and Laura were dealing with, they decided to take up the fight for all children with cerebral palsy and severe disabilities like this, and they set up this wonderful fighting organisation.
In 2009, Sue O'Reilly set up Fighting Chance, a charity in memory of her husband David.
This is my beautiful son Shane.
We have a very crisis-driven system where you actually have to be in crisis to get any help at all.
Fighting Chance provides support to those families struggling to care for dependents with disabilities. But Sue O'Reilly knows the long-term future for the disabled is not in charities, but rather in a properly funded insurance scheme which would provide lifetime support for all people with disabilities.
I hope that one of the things that comes out of Shane's life is that we do have a really good debate about the importance of a national disability insurance scheme. If we can have a debate about a carbon tax, let's have a debate about whether we need and can afford and are prepared to pay for a national disability insurance scheme. Because it's hard to believe in 2011, when you're one of the wealthiest economies in the world, that we don't have that sort of support. because we have to remember you don't choose to be disabled or to suffer disability, it chooses you.
And it's worth noting that the Productivity Commission is due to present its final report on a national disability insurance scheme to the federal government at the end of this month. The government's response is then expected by the end of November. Sharon O'Neill with that tribute to Shane O'Reilly.